The Looney Tunes franchise had quite a successful portfolio on the original Game Boy. Aside from sharing the Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle titles with Disney, which were released featuring Mickey Mouse in Japan, we'd get another 10 games. There were 2 Tasmania platformers, one by THQ and one by Sunsoft, that marked the only real average entries in a library full of strong contributions such as Bab's Big Break, Montana's Movie Madness, and Speedy Gonzales. After this first one, the Game Boy Color would also get a load of them. 4 more Looney Tunes prefixed ones, as well as a couple more Tiny Toons games. Not done by Konami, unfortunately, so I'm less confident they'll be as good as the earlier ones. Looking at the offered screenshots on the back of the box, often the only source we had back then, this looks like your standard platformer with some alternate bits as bonuses. You'd be forgiven for expecting that. The vast majority of these earlier titles were indeed platformers. Admittedly, the Tiny Toons ones in particular were some of the best DMG platformers there were, so it's kinda nice that bit managers and Infogrames have attempted something different with the license here. The game is presented in 2 forms, the main one being an isometric, room-based walkabout affair similar to Monster Max or Altered Space, a 3D adventure. Those 2 games represent the very best and the very worst, respectively, of this particular style, but they weren't the only ones on the original Game Boy. We'd see 2 German-exclusive titles released pretty close to one another, with Otto's Ottifanten and Die Maus coming out within the space of a year between 97 and 98. Both of those were admirable puzzler efforts that ultimately sat somewhere between the 2 aforementioned in terms of quality. Unfortunately, Looney Tunes Twouble might even struggle to make it onto that scale, instead marking a whole new nadir in the subgenre. Wait, worse than Altered Space? Surely not. Yeah, sadly it is. Let's not get too bogged down in comparisons between these 2 nauseatingly bad games, because ultimately this one had the benefit of 7 years, not to mention being on a better system, so any such judgment only serves to make Altered Space look better in retrospect, and I don't really want to do that because that game still sucks. Let's just analyze what's wrong with this one, and then we can all just move on with our lives. Twouble, as you can see, stars Sylvester and Tweety, with you controlling the hapless cat. You'll need to try to puzzle your way through room after room following the bird, while also avoiding spikes, trailing electricity cables, psychopathic grandmas, and of course Hector the bulldog. Some of these enemies meander about set paths, whereas some will actually try to get you. Both are tricky to avoid, and of course any contact whatsoever means instant death. You jump with A and can pick things up using B if you're stood on top of them. These might be keys, bones, buckets, or several other things. Where the game attempts a slightly different mechanic is that you can combine the 2 items you're holding into a different item. There aren't many times when you need to do this, and it's not like a puzzle thing whereby you'll need to juggle inventory. The number of pickups on a stage is very low, and you can only combine items if it's the correct thing to do. However, if, like me, you don't have the manual, it's not exactly obvious that you need to do this, or even that you have done it. Early in the first stage, you'll pick up these 2 grey rectangles. It's anyone's guess what they're supposed to be, but apparently they're pillows. You'll reach an impassable bookshelf, and will be trying your damnedest to build some sort of staircase with these 2 things by pressing B while in the air, or trying to drop one while standing on the other one. Of course, that doesn't work, you'll just pick the first one back up. No, you have to hold B, press the arrow symbol that I initially thought was to drop the items or something, which will combine what you're holding and immediately use it. On the second level, you'll find a mouse and a mechanical key thing. So you immediately recognize that the 2 go together and combine them, only for this mouse to then shoot off and be destroyed. You need to stand in the exact correct position and then combine them to create the moving platform you'll need. Of course, you'll not know that straight away, and to have to backtrack so much to get the stuff back feels really cheap. The inventory thing is a bit clunky, sure, but my biggest issue with it is that it doesn't ever feel particularly satisfying or clever. As I say, don't make the mistake of thinking this is a puzzle game, because it really isn't. If you find a bucket, you'll probably need it within a room or 2 to make a jump over something. If you find a chicken leg, chances are it'll be used in the vicinity to get Taz out of the way. It is what it is, but you can't help but feel that so much more could have been achieved with this mechanic. That ain't the worst thing though. I've mentioned plenty in the past how difficult it can be to pull off isometric controls, especially when the screen is anchored to the controller like it is on the Game Boy. On the NES or whatever, you could simply rotate the controller 45 degrees to align with how the character moves, but here obviously you can't do that. Sure, you can train your brain to get over the fact that left moves you diagonally up and left rather than diagonally down and left, but of course there's no convention for this. It's really up to a developer's whims. If you are going to insist on using this view aspect, I wouldn't say you're immediately wrong for doing so, and we've seen with Monster Max and a couple of others that it can actually work really damn well if you're just careful with it. Just for God's sake, do be careful with it and make absolutely certain that the rest of your movement is spot on. You cannot have what's on offer here. Far too often Sylvester will move a pixel or two in an unintended direction simply due to the fact that the precision demanded of the player is far too much. Doorways are far too stingy with what they'll accept. So often you'll get stuck on a corner simply by virtue of being that pixel or two out of place, and you can guarantee that's when Granny'll clobber you with her rolling pin. You get 15 lives on easy mode and can replenish one of them by collecting 4 sardine tins, but these will diminish so quickly. If you die in a room, you'll be returned to the doorway you entered from, but will lose any held item you had. This can result in yet more backtracking to re-pick up a bucket that you for some reason lost when you died. Death is way too frequent as well. You have to leave loads of clearance to get over any of the obstacles, and of course, the viewpoint doesn't help you work this out. This only serves to compound the fiddly and awkward controls. Not only do you have to work out what direction to press, but you also have to do it deftly and nimbly. Not an easy ask, believe me. Quite often will enemies spring right on you when you enter a room, and any hesitation will often leave you in an unsurvivable position. Your only real choice in this instance is to flip between rooms and only move once you've figured out what the route is. This would be fine if it weren't for the couple of seconds loading time each time you transition. Might not sound like a lot, but you'll certainly feel it. Get to the end of a stage and there's no boss or anything. It's quite anticlimactic, although you will be rewarded with the game's only real plus point, a charming little cartoon vignette of Sylvester finally catching up to his quarry, only to lose him for one reason or another. I haven't even mentioned what's at the start of each level, however. Right at the start of the review, I mentioned there are 2 game modes. The second of these, well, first technically, are these bizarrely included rubber banding side-scrollers where you need to run rightwards, jumping over stuff like spikes and flames as well as enemies chasing after Tweety. You can't actually catch him and he'll move at the same speed as you. I'm at a complete loss as to why these little sections were featured, as none of them are very challenging, nor do they take longer than 30 seconds. They also don't add any context, plot, or even any entertainment factor. They just seem like total non-sequiturs. Starting off the whole game with one was a really stupid and potentially dangerous decision too. I can easily see players thinking that was the whole game and just giving up there and then. Not if you bought it, perhaps, but do you remember going into video game stores in the late 90s and standing in line to have a quick blast on one of those anchored-in-place consoles? With your mum tapping her watch telling you to hurry up, there's no way you'd have stuck around playing this when Ocarina of Time was on the very next stall. First impressions and all that. Irritatingly, these side-on sections have the best graphics in the game. The isometric stages really aren't all that great to look at. Don't get me started on the sound quality, which is thoroughly miserable throughout. I don't want to put too much stock into this last comment necessarily because it's really just one example of many that the Game Boy Color served us up with, but Twouble showed us, a mere 3 months into its lifespan, exactly what the console's biggest criticism has always been. This coming out in 1998 really wasn't good enough. It's uglier than much older games despite the colorization, and the controls and hit detection are somehow worse than something you'd get at the start of the decade. Sure, the color console was new, but the Game Boy wasn't. For the same technology that was, for all intents and purposes, nearly 10 years old at this point, the programming on games like this, not to mention the presentation, should be of a much higher standard than it is. The only conclusion you can draw from this is that this game, and many like it sadly appears, is simply a hackneyed piece of shovelware, rushed out to take the Christmas money from unsuspecting parents, thinking they were grabbing a nice gift for their kid. At the end of a console's life, you can maybe understand cramming naff old crap like this onto shelves, but the Game Boy Color had only just come out, not even close to being good enough.